Chairs out.
Not from the state.
All right, very well. Let's bring chairs.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Hahn.
Good afternoon.
I don't think we need to exchange names, but this is the first time you and I have ever spoken, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the testimony you have heard today and about maybe anything involving this case, because you have been present throughout a good part of the testimony, correct?
Yes, sir.
Let's start with meeting my client when you were younger.
Yes.
You both grew up in Lenore.
We did.
Which is in the western part of the state, correct?
Yes, sir.
Like west of Winston-Salem by an hour or so. Would that
Yes,
be
sir.
fair?
Mm-hmm.
You were raised by your great aunt and uncle, correct?
Eventually, yes, sir.
David and Pat Greer.
That's correct.
Eventually, do you remember when that happened?
I spent a good portion of my time with them throughout my life, but I ultimately went to stay with them, I think, in between 4th and 5th grade, and that's when I would be with them the rest of the time.
When you refer to mom and dad, are you typically referring to them? Or
Usually.
do you call them by something else? Or?
I mean, I grew up calling them Pat and David, so I call them Pat and David, but when I'm talking to others, I usually refer to them as Mom and Dad.
Okay. I want to ask you about the church, Whitnall Pentecostal Church in Lenore. You were in like the 9th grade when you met Mr. Broyhill, correct?
I was going into the 9th grade, yes, sir.
Going into the 9th grade.
Yes.
It was like the summer between.
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing back, and you correct me if I ever say anything. By the way, you've heard me do this with other witnesses. If I'm wrong about something, you go ahead and correct me, okay?
I will.
How did you went to High Brighton High School?
That's correct.
Does that start in the 9th grade?
It does.
So you were coming out of middle school at that time in your life.
I was.
You had not even started high school yet.
That's correct.
Whitnall Pentecostal is a a relatively modern, nice building in Lenore. I don't think it was the original church, correct?
That's correct.
Do you remember the prior church? Did you attend it then?
I do.
When they built the new place, it sort of allowed them to bring more families in, correct?
That's correct.
But the families who were part of the smaller church, prior to that one being built, it was a smaller congregation as well, correct?
Yes.
I think there was a point where they like added a service or something on Sundays to accommodate more people joining. Is that fair?
I'm sure they did.
And I assume that's why they built the new building, because more people were coming in.
I would imagine.
But I'm gonna refer them as your folks, your parents, the Greers. Is that all right? All right. They were members of the earlier church before the new one was built, correct?
That's correct.
As was Mr. Broyhill's parents.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Now, at that point, it was not a big church, so a lot of people knew each other sort of as an acquaintance, but that didn't necessarily mean they were close or friends or anything, correct?
I was young, so I don't know, but I imagine.
You certainly did not, by your testimony, indicate that you had any kind of really firsthand knowledge of Mr. Broyhill, other than to recognize him as that's someone in the church.
That's correct.
I mean, by that I mean, you're coming out of 8th grade, there weren't like any, I don't know, youth groups, things of that nature. That church has a like a series of buildings behind it where they do, like, I think, activities for the youth of the parish. You know what I'm talking about?
I mean, are you talking about the old church or the new church? Or?
The new church has some like adjacent buildings in the back,
I guess so.
like
yes.
right next to the church itself.
Yes.
I didn't know if you were part of any kind of like youth groups or something where Mr. Broyhill would have been involved, that you would have, you know, gotten to know him, maybe not as closely as you would testify about, but did something with him, or
I don't
taught
think-
a class or something.
I don't think so. I mean, I only occasionally went to Sunday school, and I don't recall him being there. He may have been. I didn't really get involved. Got involved in the youth more actively in 8th that summer, around the same time that we met.
You hadn't been as involved prior to that.
That's correct.
Okay. This, and I think, like a lot of boys in the 8th grade, you were chasing a girl at that time.
That's what I said, yes.
Yeah. Who was going to go on this thing. Now, just to clarify, this was not some day trip thing. This was like a week-long thing in Daytona,
I don't know if it was a week, but it was a multi-day trip.
where members of different Pentecostal churches from all over were going to go and attend this gathering, correct?
It was some sort of conference or, yes.
When you got there, there was a lot of people, right?
Yes, sir.
Not that big of a group from your church, but a handful.
I don't remember. There were several hotel rooms booked.
For your group?
Yes, there were at least 2 rooms for guys and multiple rooms for girls as well, so several rooms.
And on that trip, Mr. Broyhill was you stated one of the chaperones,
That's correct.
right? A lot of times when kids go on something like that, they usually hang around with other kids. In this particular instance, it seems like, from what I'm gathering from your testimony, that the two of you sort of made a connection.
I didn't really know most of the guys were older. I didn't really know them as well, and they were. Some of them were, sneaking out at night and doing the things that teenagers do, and I wasn't. But I ended up talking a lot to John, as well as to this lady named Amy, who was maybe in between our ages, and one other person. It was like a group of 4 of us that talked a fair amount, or spoke a fair amount.
To the point that when you got back from the trip, even though that's sort of a significant age difference at that point in your life, when you're in 8th grade and he's graduated from high school.
Yeah, I was going into 9th.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. When I said 8th, I mean going into 9th grade.
Yes, sir.
But a little bit different of an age group. He's college age, and you're just starting high school, and now you guys, from knowing each other, continued to stay close after this trip, right?
That's correct.
Now when you saw each other, it wasn't just, hey, I recognize him. It was, you guys would talk, you would hang out a little bit. I think there was a prayer service on Wednesdays at the church.
Yes.
Did you start going to some of those at that time?
We would go to some evening services on Wednesdays and Sundays.
a lot of times on a Sunday or after one of those prayer services, you might go to that. You might go out and grab a bite to eat somewhere.
A lot of the families would, yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
I said a lot of the families would, yes, sir.
Okay. So was this you and John Broyhill going places, or was it like the two families going places?
I mean, it was always a combination. Sometimes he and I would go to dinner, on the weekend, or might go to a movie. Sometimes it was a group of parents. Sometimes it would be my parents would go on home, and he would take me home, but it would be with parents and friends and other people.
Other people from the church.
Correct.
Your folks, the Greers and the Broyhills, they really didn't interact a whole lot with each other, did they?
No, not that. I mean, outside of church, no, not necessarily.
Yeah, they knew each other from church, but beyond that, it's not like, they're going on trips or
Yes, sir.
having dinner together, things like that.
Correct.
A lot of times, especially in those first, say, couple of years of high school, I think you said that that was a time when you and Mr. Broyhill hung out a little bit more, say, as opposed to when you were in your later years of high school.
That's correct.
It was not uncommon for him to come over to your house and just hang out, watch TV, things like that.
That's correct.
In fact, probably more often going to your house than, say, to where his parents,
Yes, sir.
and I'll clarify that a second too with the parents, because his situation was had changed right around the time that you met him. Would that be fair?
Yes, his parents had divorced or were divorcing. I can't remember.
Right around the time that he was meeting you, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Mr. Broyhill became kind of a person that your family started to invite to different things. It would not be uncommon for him to attend, say, like holidays and birthdays, things of that nature.
No, he would usually stop by on Christmas Day. He'd spend Christmas morning with his family and stop by on Christmas Day during that time period. Yeah,
He'd come over and be part of your family gathering.
at times, yes, sir.
Your mom was very nice to him about sort of aware of they were aware of the fact that his parents had split, right?
I imagine they were.
Sort of not a big church. Everybody sort of knew what was going on, right?
Not a big town either.
Not a big town. And so your mom sort of went out of her way to sort of include John in.
She did that with everyone, but always overcooks.
Were you aware that Mr. Broyhill's father kin at that church
I believe so.
is something that you're? It's hard to speak to what another person's aware like this. Did your parents? They were aware of that.
I mean, I think the deacons took up the money so everyone would see whoever was taking up the money or the collection. So I'm sure they were. I don't know.
In addition, with your family, there were and do things. Sometimes you guys would take trips to Hickory, and you'd go shopping, maybe hit a restaurant or two.
Sometimes shopping, oftentimes eating, going out to eat.
And I know you recalled him working at you have some recollection of that. You were also aware of the fact that he worked, correct?
Yes, sir.
Once a year during that time frame, your folks would take you on a vacation for about a week, usually in June to Myrtle Beach, right?
That's correct.
Mr. Broyhill was on that vacation, correct?
My
Hudson and things like that. Mentioned, and you not with him so much that he had attended a called Harris Chapel
Yes, sir.
Christian Academy, I think, something like that, right? He was, in fact, it was sort of a, I won't say a joke, but he was like the salutatorian of his class, but he was in a class of 3, correct?
Yes, that used to be a joke around with him.
Yeah. And that's pretty, I mean, fairly close from hanging out with him and learning about him as much as you did. That's sort of like what that school was about. He attended small classes like that pretty much from the time he started school until the time he graduated high school, correct?
He did. Well, I assume.
You know where the school is and you've seen it.
Yes.
All right. When in your younger years, when you guys were hanging out, and as you mentioned at the time, Mr. Broyl's parents were going through the split at that time. It'd be fair to say that the majority of the time if the two of you were going to hang out at one or the other's house, it was typically at your home. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
So you had certainly met his father on a number of occasions, but this wasn't someone like you hung around with and spent a lot of time with, was it?
Not a substantial amount of time, no.
You went, you finished high school and were accepted to and attended University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
That's